The spaceship moved through the night sky without making any sound. Inside the ship, Captain Vexnor looked at the screen in front of him. His mission was simple. He needed to take one human from Earth and bring them back for study. The Galactic Council wanted to learn about this new species they had discovered. Vexnor was a Xylothian. He stood 7 feet tall with gray skin and large black eyes. He had been doing research missions for 20 years. This was supposed to be easy. Just take one human, study them for a while, and then move on to the next mission. The scanner showed a human male alone in the forest. Perfect. No one would see the abduction happen. Vexnor pressed a button and the blue light shot down from the ship. Jake Morrison was checking his traps when the light hit him. He had been living in the woods for 3 weeks. This was normal for Jake. He loved testing his survival skills. He knew how to make fire without matches. He could find food and water anywhere. He had spent 20 years learning how to survive in any situation, but nothing prepared him for this. The blue light lifted Jake off the ground. He tried to move, but his body would not listen. His knife fell from his hand. Within seconds, he was inside a white room. 5 tall aliens stood around him, watching. Jake's heart was beating fast, but his mind stayed calm. This was just another survival situation. First rule, stay calm and look around. He saw white walls with no doors. The air was warm and easy to breathe. The aliens looked strong, but they had no weapons. One alien stepped forward. He wore a different uniform from the others. A small device on his chest started speaking in English. "You have been chosen for study. You will stay here. Do not try to fight us." Jake said nothing. He had learned that sometimes staying quiet was the best choice. Let them think he was scared. Let them think he was just a simple human who did not understand what was happening. The aliens left the room. A panel in the wall opened and a tray appeared. On it were gray blocks of food and a container of water. Jake walked over slowly. He picked up one of the blocks and smelled it. It did not smell bad. He took a small bite. It tasted like nothing, but it was food. Jake ate one block and drank some water. Then he started to explore his prison. He ran his hands along the walls, feeling for any cracks or weak spots. He checked the floor, tapping it with his foot to see if any part sounded hollow. He looked up at the ceiling, trying to find where the air was coming from. Hours went by. Jake kept exploring and thinking. The aliens came back a few times. They stood outside and watched him through the walls. Jake pretended not to notice. He just kept moving around the room like he was nervous, but Jake was not nervous. He was working. Every time the aliens came, he watched them. He counted them. He saw how they moved. He noticed that they walked carefully, like they were not used to fighting. These were scientists, not soldiers. That was good. Scientists could be predictable. Scientists followed patterns, and patterns could be learned. Jake sat down on the floor and closed his eyes. He needed to rest, but his mind kept working. He thought about everything he had seen. The ship was advanced, but the aliens seemed to think humans were not very smart. They had not tied him up. They had not put guards in the room. They just locked him in and assumed he would stay scared. That was their first mistake. Jake had survived in places where most people would die. He had lived through storms that destroyed houses. He had fought off wild animals. He had gone days without food or water. A locked room on a spaceship was just another challenge. He opened his eyes and looked at the ceiling again. Somewhere up there was a vent bringing in air. Air meant a passage. A passage meant a way to move through the ship. But he needed more information first. The next time the aliens came, Jake was ready. He stood up and walked toward the wall where they were watching. "I need to use a bathroom," he said clearly. The aliens looked at each other. After a moment, a small room appeared in the corner. It had what looked like a toilet and a sink. The aliens had not thought about this before. They were learning about human needs as they went. Good. That meant they did not know everything about humans. That meant they would make more mistakes. Jake used the bathroom and washed his hands. The water was warm. The soap smelled strange, but it worked. He looked at everything carefully. The pipes, the walls, the drain. Everything was information. When he came out, more food had appeared. Jake ate slowly, thinking about his next move. He needed to make the aliens comfortable around him. He needed them to think he was cooperating. Then when they relaxed, he could learn more about the ship. He laid down on the floor to sleep. The lights dimmed automatically. The ship was taking care of him like he was a pet. But Jake was not a pet. He was a hunter. and right now he was hunting for information. As he drifted off to sleep, Jake thought about his cabin back on Earth. He thought about the mountains and forests he loved. He thought about the life he had built for himself, and he made a promise. He would get back to that life, no matter what it took. The aliens thought they had captured a simple human. They thought he would be an easy subject to study. They had no idea that Jake Morrison had spent his entire life preparing for impossible situations. They had no idea that survivalists never gave up. They had no idea that they had made a huge mistake. Jake smiled in the darkness. Let them think they were in control. Let them run their tests and take their notes. While they were busy studying him, he would be studying them, and when the time was right, he would show them what humans were really capable of. The first day of his captivity ended, but for Jake Morrison, it was just the beginning of his greatest survival challenge yet. 3 days had passed since the aliens took Jake. He had been keeping track of time by counting the sleep cycles. The lights dimmed every 12 hours, which meant the aliens followed a day and night schedule, just like humans did. Jake had learned many things in those 3 days. The aliens came to check on him 6 times each day. They always came at the same times. They brought food 3 times a day. The food was always the same gray blocks, but Jake did not complain. He had eaten worse things in the wilderness. The aliens used machines to scan him. The machines made a humming sound and glowed with blue light. They never touched him. They just pointed the machines at him and looked at their tablets. Jake stood still during these scans. He wanted them to think he was cooperating. But while they scanned him, Jake was scanning them right back. He counted 5 different aliens who came to his room regularly. The one who seemed to be in charge wore a dark blue uniform. Jake decided to call him Captain in his mind. There was a female alien who came most often. She seemed very interested in everything Jake did. Jake called her the scientist. The other 3 aliens rotated shifts. They came, did their scans, and left quickly. They seemed bored with their jobs. That was useful information. Board guards made mistakes. On the 4th day, something changed. The scientist came into his room. This was the first time any alien had actually entered his space. Jake stood up but did not move toward her. "Hello," she said through her translator device. "I am Kessa. I study new species." Jake nodded slowly. "I am Jake." Kessa seemed pleased that he responded. "You are very calm, Jake. Other species we have studied showed much fear. Why are you not afraid?" Jake thought about his answer carefully. "Fear does not help me. Understanding helps me." "Understanding what?" "Where I am. Who you are. What you want from me." Kessa's large eyes seemed to brighten. "You wish to understand us?" "Yes," Jake said simply. This was exactly what Jake wanted. If he could talk to them, he could learn more. And the more he learned, the better his chances of escape became. Kessa asked him many questions that day. She wanted to know about human bodies, human food, human sleep patterns. Jake answered honestly. There was no point in lying about basic facts. Besides, every question she asked told him something about what the aliens did not know. They did not know that humans were very strong compared to their size. They did not know that humans could survive without food for weeks. They did not know that humans were very good at adapting to new situations. In return for answering questions, Jake asked for something. "This room is too small. Humans need space to move. We need exercise. Without it, we get sick." Kessa considered this. "I will speak to the captain." 2 days later, Jake's room grew bigger. The walls moved back, doubling his space. New equipment appeared. There were weights, bars to climb, and open floor space. It was not much, but it was enough. Jake used the equipment every day. He did exercises to stay strong. But he also used this time to test things. He jumped to see how high he could go. The gravity felt normal, which meant the ship could control gravity. He hit the walls to see how strong they were. Very strong, but not unbreakable. He also noticed something important. When he exercised hard, the temperature in the room changed slightly. The ship was responding to his body heat. That meant sensors were watching him all the time. But sensors could be tricked. Kessa came every day now. Their conversations grew longer. Jake told her about Earth, about forests and mountains and oceans. He told her about human history, about how humans had survived ice ages and diseases and wars. He made sure to emphasize how adaptable humans were. "Your species sounds very difficult to kill," Kessa observed one day. "We are survivors," Jake agreed. "We have to be. Earth is not an easy planet." What Jake did not tell Kessa was that he was also learning about Xylothians. He learned that they came from a world with less gravity, which was why they moved so carefully. He learned that they relied heavily on their technology. Without their machines, they would be helpless. He also learned that their ship had only 12 crew members. 12 aliens to run an entire spaceship. That seemed like very few. On Earth, ships had much larger crews. This meant their technology was very automated, and automated systems could be hacked. On the 10th day, Jake made a request. "I want to see more of the ship." Kessa looked surprised. "Why? I am getting sad staying in one room. Humans call it cabin fever. If you keep me locked up too long, I will become depressed. Depressed humans do not give good information." Kessa seemed concerned. She talked to the captain. They discussed it for a long time. Finally, they agreed. Jake could walk through parts of the ship, but only with a guard. The first walk was short. An alien guard walked with Jake through 3 corridors. Jake looked at everything. He saw labels on doors, though he could not read the alien writing. He saw computer panels on the walls. He counted the steps between rooms. He memorized the layout. Most importantly, he saw that the ship was not designed for security. There were no locked doors except for the research areas. There were no cameras watching the hallways. Why would there be? The Xylothians were peaceful scientists. They had never needed security. Over the next week, Jake went on more walks. Each time he saw more of the ship. He met other crew members. There was an engineer named Plixon who maintained the ship's systems. There was a medical officer who studied alien biology. There was a pilot who controlled where the ship went. Jake was friendly to all of them. He answered their questions. He told them stories about Earth. He made them laugh with tales of camping trips gone wrong. He became less of a specimen and more of a person to them. This was part of his plan. If they saw him as a person, they would be less careful around him. They would make mistakes, and mistakes were opportunities. Jake also noticed the crew's routines. The captain checked the ship's systems every morning at the same time. The engineer worked in the engine room during the night shift when most others were sleeping. The guards changed shifts exactly every 8 hours. Patterns, everything had patterns. And Jake was very good at learning patterns. On the 20th day, Jake saw something very important. During one of his walks, he passed the engineering room. The door was open. Inside, Plixon was working at a large computer console. Jake watched for just a moment, but it was enough. He saw Plixon press several buttons in sequence. He saw the computer screen change. He saw how the interface worked. It was different from human computers, but not that different. There were menus. There were input commands. There were confirmation buttons. Jake understood the basic logic even if he could not read the words. That night, Jake lay in his room thinking. He now knew the ship's layout. He knew the crew's routines. He had seen how their computers worked. He knew they had only 12 crew members and almost no security. He was not ready to escape yet, but he was getting close. He just needed a few more pieces of information. Then he would make his move. The Xylothians thought they were studying Jake. They thought they were learning about humans. But the whole time, Jake had been studying them, and he had learned everything he needed to know. Jake had been on the ship for 23 days. He marked each day by making a small scratch on the underside of his exercise equipment where the aliens could not see it. Old habits from survival training. Always keep track of time. His relationship with the crew had changed significantly. Kessa now spent several hours with him each day. They no longer just talked about human biology. They talked about philosophy, culture, and even jokes. Kessa found human humor confusing but fascinating. Plixon, the engineer, had started visiting too. He was curious about how humans built things without advanced technology. Jake told him about making shelters from branches and leaves. He explained how humans made fire by rubbing sticks together. Plixon found this incredible. You create heat through friction alone, without any power source? We use what nature gives us, Jake explained. When you do not have technology, you learn to be creative. These conversations were not just friendly chats. Jake was teaching them something important. He was showing them that humans could survive and adapt with almost nothing. He wanted them to understand that humans were resourceful. This would be important later. Jake had also become friendly with the pilot, a young Xylothian named Tren. Tren was excited about exploring new worlds. He asked Jake many questions about Earth's geography. What is the most dangerous place on your planet? Tren asked one day. Jake thought about it. It depends. The mountains can kill you with cold and avalanches. The deserts can kill you with heat and no water. The oceans can drown you in storms. But humans live in all these places. We adapt. Remarkable, Tren said. Xylothians could not survive in such harsh conditions without our technology. This was exactly the kind of information Jake needed. The Xylothians were dependent on their technology. Take that away and they would be helpless. During his walks through the ship, Jake had been paying close attention to the computer terminals. They were everywhere, on the walls in every room, built into the control panels. The Xylothians trusted their computers completely. They never worried about someone accessing them without permission. Why would they? Every Xylothian on the ship was trained and trusted. They had no concept of hacking or unauthorized access. Their society was built on cooperation and trust. Jake had grown up in a world where people locked their doors and protected their passwords. He understood security because he understood that not everyone could be trusted. The Xylothians had never learned this lesson. On day 25, Jake made a careful move. During a conversation with Plixen, he asked about the ship's emergency systems. What happens if something goes wrong? Like if there is a fire or the power goes out? Plixen was happy to explain. We have multiple backup systems. The computer monitors everything constantly. If there is any problem, it alerts the entire crew and activates safety protocols. How does it alert everyone? Through our communication implants, Plixen said, pointing to a small device behind his ear. And through speakers and lights throughout the ship. Everyone knows immediately when there is an emergency. What kind of emergencies have you had? Very few, Plixen admitted. Our ships are very reliable. In my 10 years of service, I have only seen minor problems. A power fluctuation here, a navigation adjustment there. Nothing serious. This was more good information. The ship was reliable, which meant the crew was not used to dealing with real emergencies. They would panic if something unexpected happened. Jake also learned about their navigation systems. During one walk, Tren showed him the bridge. It was small with just 2 seats and several computer screens. This controls the entire ship? Jake asked, looking impressed. Yes, Tren said proudly. I can navigate anywhere in the galaxy from this chair. The computer does most of the work. I just tell it where to go. What if you need to change course quickly? Simple. I input new coordinates and the computer calculates the best path. It takes only seconds. Jake nodded, filing this information away. The navigation system was computer-controlled. Change the computer's instructions and you could change where the ship went. That night, Jake had trouble sleeping. Not because he was worried, but because he was planning. All the pieces were coming together. He knew the ship's layout. He knew the crew's routines. He knew their technology and its weaknesses. He knew they trusted him. Now he needed one more thing, an opportunity. The opportunity came on day 28. Kessa told him important news. In 7 days, we will meet with a larger research ship. You will be transferred to their facility for more detailed study. It is a great honor. The facility has much better equipment than our small ship. Jake kept his face calm, but inside his mind was racing. A research facility would be much harder to escape from. It would have more security, more crew, better containment systems. If he was going to escape, it had to be before the transfer. 7 days. He had 7 days to get back to Earth. That sounds interesting, Jake said carefully. Will I be able to come back to this ship? No, Kessa said. The facility will be your new home. You will meet many other researchers there. They are very excited to study you. My new home, Jake thought. Not a chance. That evening, Jake began preparing in earnest. He started saving small amounts of food, hiding them in places the sensors would not detect. He needed to make himself look sick without actually getting sick. He ate less at meals but snacked on his hidden food to maintain his energy. After 3 days, the medical officer noticed. Your food consumption has decreased. Are you feeling unwell? Jake nodded weakly. Headaches, nausea. I think the stress of knowing I will be transferred is affecting me. This was not entirely a lie. The stress was real. But Jake was using it. The medical officer scanned him. The scans showed elevated stress hormones and some signs of malnutrition. Both were real, both were controllable, and both were part of Jake's plan. You should rest, the medical officer said. I will instruct the crew to minimize disturbances during the night cycle. Perfect. That was exactly what Jake needed. Over the next 2 days, Jake continued to appear increasingly unwell.
He moved slower during his walks.
He answered questions with less energy. He spent more time lying down. The crew became concerned. They had grown to like Jake. They did not want him to be sick. Kessa visited more often, trying to cheer him up with stories about the research facility. You will have a much larger space there, and there will be other species to meet. You will not be lonely. Jake managed a weak smile. Thank you, Kessa. You have all been very kind to me. He meant it. Despite being his captors, the Xylothians had treated him well. They had never hurt him or been cruel. They were just scientists doing their job. In another situation, Jake might have enjoyed learning from them, but they had taken him from his home. They planned to keep him locked up forever, and Jake Morrison was not going to let that happen. On the 32nd day, 4 days before the transfer, Jake was ready. He had all the information he needed. He had studied every detail of the ship. He knew exactly what he needed to do. That night, as the lights dimmed for the sleep cycle, Jake lay in his room and went over the plan one more time. It was risky. There were many things that could go wrong, but doing nothing was not an option. Tomorrow night, during the skeleton crew shift, he would make his move. He would escape his room, access the navigation computer, and change their course back to Earth. Then he would get to an escape pod and return home. It sounded simple, but Jake knew that simple plans often went wrong. He would have to be ready to adapt. That was what survivalists did best. They adapted to whatever situation they faced. Jake closed his eyes, but he did not sleep much that night. Tomorrow would be the most important day of his life. He would either make it home, or he would fail and spend the rest of his life as an alien research subject. He had survived everything Earth could throw at him. Now it was time to see if he could survive the stars. The day passed slowly. Jake went through his normal routine, but everything felt different. He exercised lightly, not wanting to seem too energetic. He ate his food slowly, still pretending to be unwell. When Kessa came to check on him in the afternoon, he barely spoke. You should rest more, Kessa said with concern. The transfer is in 3 days. We want you healthy for the journey, Jake nodded weakly. I will try. After Kessa left, Jake lay on his bed and waited. He had spent weeks loosening a floor panel during his exercise sessions. The work had been so gradual, so careful, that the monitoring systems never noticed. Every day, just a tiny bit more. Now the panel was ready to come off completely. The hours crawled by. Dinner came. Jake ate half of it. The lights dimmed for the night cycle. Jake waited another 2 hours, lying perfectly still, controlling his breathing. The sensors needed to think he was asleep. At what Jake estimated was 3 in the morning, he moved. Slowly, quietly, he got up and went to the exercise area. The floor panel came up easily in his hands. Below it was a narrow maintenance tunnel, just as he had calculated from the vibrations and airflow he had studied. Jake had spent his life crawling through tight spaces in caves and under fallen trees. This was no different. He squeezed into the tunnel, pulling the panel back into place behind him. If anyone checked on him now, they would see an empty room. But hopefully everyone was asleep. The tunnel was dark and cramped. Jake felt his way forward, moving by touch and memory. He had memorized the ship's layout. The engineering room should be 30 feet to his left, 1 level up. There were access points throughout the maintenance system for repair drones. Jake found the vertical shaft and climbed. His hands and feet found holds on the metal rungs. He moved in complete silence, a skill learned from years of hunting. At the top, he found another panel. He pushed it slowly, carefully, and it opened. He was in a corridor. Dim emergency lights lit the way. No one was around. Most of the crew was sleeping. Only the night shift would be awake, and they would be in specific areas. Jake moved like a shadow down the corridor. He had studied the crew's patterns for weeks. He knew that at this time, Plixen would be alone in the engineering room. The night shift pilot would be on the bridge. Everyone else would be in their quarters. He reached the engineering room. The door was open as he expected. Plixen was inside, working at a console. Jake could see him through the doorway, his back turned. Jake stepped into the doorway. Hello, Plixen. The engineer spun around, his large eyes going wide with shock. Jake, how did you get out? You should be in your chamber. Jake raised his hands in a peaceful gesture. He had no weapons, no way to threaten the alien. This had to work through words alone. I need your help, Jake said calmly. I need to go home. Plixon reached toward his communication device, but Jake spoke quickly. Please just listen for 1 minute. Just 1 minute, then if you want to call security, you can. Plixon's hand hovered over the device. You have 1 minute. You have studied me for 33 days, Jake said. In that time, have I ever hurt anyone? Have I ever been violent or dangerous? No, Plixon admitted. You have been cooperative. I have been cooperative because you have all been kind to me. But I cannot go to that research facility. I cannot spend the rest of my life as a specimen. I have a home. I have a life. Surely you can understand that. Plixon's expression was hard to read, but Jake had learned to recognize Xylothian emotions. The engineer was conflicted. What are you planning to do? Plixon asked quietly. I'm going to change the navigation computer to take us near Earth. Then I will use an escape pod to return home. No one gets hurt. The ship continues its mission. I just get to go home. You cannot access the navigation system. The security protocols would prevent it. Your security protocols are designed to stop outside threats, Jake said. But I have watched your crew for weeks. I have seen how you input commands. I have learned your patterns. I am not trying to hack your system. I am just going to tell it what I want the same way you do. Plixon was quiet for a long moment. This is a significant violation of my duties. Yes, Jake agreed. And I am sorry. You have been a friend to me. But I am not meant to be a prisoner. I am meant to be free. The engineer looked at Jake for what felt like a very long time. Finally he sighed, a sound that worked across species. I have been working on repairs for the past 10 minutes. Plixon said slowly. I have noticed nothing unusual. I am very focused on my work. Relief flooded through Jake. Thank you. However, Plixon continued, turning to his console, if someone were to access the navigation system, they should know that any unusual course change would alert the captain immediately, unless the change was logged as a routine adjustment. He pulled up a screen showing a star map. There happens to be an asteroid field near our current position. A careful pilot would adjust course to avoid it. Such an adjustment, if made now, would bring us close to the third planet in this system within 6 hours. He stepped away from the console. I need to check the engine room. I will be gone for exactly 10 minutes. Jake moved quickly to the navigation terminal. The interface glowed with alien symbols, but he had watched the crew use these systems many times. He understood the logic even if he could not read the language. He touched the screen where he had seen Tren touch it. A menu appeared. He selected what looked like navigation commands. The system asked for authorization. This was the critical moment. Jake input the sequence he had seen Captain Vexnor use every morning. The captain checked the ship's systems like clockwork, always using the same code sequence. The computer accepted it. Jake worked carefully, remembering everything he had learned. He found the course settings. He input a new trajectory, marking it as a routine navigation adjustment to avoid the asteroid field. The computer processed the command, checked the star map, and approved the change. They would reach Earth orbit in 6 hours. Jake erased his tracks as best he could, making the navigation change look like it had been done by a crew member during normal operations. Then he left the engineering room and headed for the escape pod bay. The corridors were still empty. Jake moved silently, his heart pounding. He was so close now. Just a few more minutes and he would be free. He reached the escape pod bay. 5 pods sat in their docking clamps, sleek and unused. The Xylothians almost never had emergencies. These pods were just backups. Jake climbed into the nearest pod. The interior was simple. 1 seat, basic controls, life support systems. He strapped himself in and looked at the control panel. Most of it was automated. The pod would fly itself once launched, but he could not launch yet. He had to wait until the ship reached Earth orbit. If he launched now in deep space, he would just drift forever. Jake settled in to wait. The pod was cramped but comfortable. Through the small window, he could see the pod bay, empty and quiet. He was alone. Hours passed. Jake dozed fitfully, starting awake at every small sound. His body was tense, ready to react. This was the waiting game, and waiting was often the hardest part of survival. Finally, through the pod's window, Jake saw it. Earth. That beautiful blue and green sphere, hanging in the darkness of space. He had never seen it from space before. It was the most amazing sight he had ever witnessed. The ship was entering orbit. It was time. Jake activated the pod's launch sequence. The computer ran diagnostics, confirmed everything was working, and began the countdown. 10 seconds, 9, 8. In the ship above, alarms started blaring. The crew was waking up, realizing their prisoner was gone. But it was too late. 3, 2, 1. The pod shot away from the ship like a bullet, racing toward Earth. Through the window, Jake saw the Xylothian ship growing smaller behind him. He had done it. He had escaped. Now he just had to survive the landing. The escape pod shook violently as it hit Earth's atmosphere. Warning lights flashed across the control panel. Jake gripped the armrests and tried to stay calm. The pod's systems were designed for Xylothian atmosphere and gravity. Earth was different. The computer was struggling to adjust. Outside the window, Jake saw flames. The pod was burning from the friction of re-entry. The temperature inside was rising. Sweat ran down Jake's face. The shaking got worse. For a moment, Jake wondered if he would survive his own escape. Then the shaking stopped. The pod had made it through the worst part. The flames disappeared. Through the window, Jake saw clouds then land. The computer was guiding them down, searching for a safe landing zone. Jake recognized the landscape. Mountains covered in forests, rivers cutting through valleys. This was the Appalachian region, the same area where he had been taken. The pod was taking him home. The landing was rough. The pod hit the ground hard, bounced, skidded sideways, and finally stopped. Jake sat still for a moment, catching his breath. Then he hit the release button. The door hissed open, fresh air rushed in. It smelled like pine trees and morning dew. Jake unbuckled and climbed out of the pod. His legs were shaky, but he was standing on Earth. He was home. The sun was just starting to rise. Birds were singing in the trees. Everything was exactly as he remembered. For a moment, Jake just stood there, breathing in the familiar air, feeling the solid ground under his feet. Then his survival instincts kicked in. The pod was alien technology. If anyone found it, there would be questions. Scientists, military, government agents. They would want to know where it came from. They would search for him. His life would never be normal again. Jake examined the pod carefully. It was small, about the size of a car. The hull was made of some kind of metal he did not recognize. There were markings in alien language on the side. Inside the pod, Jake found an emergency kit. It contained food, water, medical supplies, and several tools. Among the tools was something that looked like a flare gun. Jake examined it carefully. It was not a flare gun. It was some kind of cutting tool or maybe a weapon. He tested it on a rock. A bright beam shot out and melted the rock instantly. Perfect. Jake spent the next hour systematically destroying the pod. He used the alien tool to cut through the hull, melting the metal into unrecognizable slag. He smashed the computer systems. He broke apart the control panels. He scattered the pieces over a wide area. When he was done, nothing was left that looked like alien technology. Just melted metal and broken parts that could have been from anything. To investigators, it would look like a meteorite impact. They might wonder about the unusual metal, but they would never guess the truth. Jake buried the alien tool under a pile of rocks. Maybe someday he would come back for it, or maybe it was better left hidden. Now came the hard part. Jake needed a story. He had been gone for 34 days. People would have been looking for him. Park rangers, search and rescue teams, maybe even his family. He needed to explain where he had been. The truth was impossible. No one would believe he had been abducted by aliens. Even if they did believe him, Jake did not want that attention. He wanted his quiet life back, so he would tell a partial truth. He had gone into the woods for a solo survival trip. He had gotten lost or injured. He had survived on his own for a month. It happened sometimes. People got lost in the wilderness and survived for weeks. Jake started walking. He knew these mountains. Even after a month away, he could navigate by the sun and stars. His cabin was 3 days of hard hiking from here. But he would not go straight there. First, he needed to establish his story. He walked for hours, following game trails and streams. His body was weak from a month of low activity on the ship, but his survival skills were as sharp as ever. He found water. He identified edible plants. By evening, he had covered 10 miles. That night, Jake made a simple shelter from branches and leaves. He started a fire using friction, just like he had described to Plixon. The familiar routine was comforting. This was what he knew. This was who he was. The next day, Jake continued walking. He deliberately avoided trails that people used. He wanted to look like someone who had been lost, not someone who knew exactly where he was going. On the third day, Jake finally let himself be found. He saw a hiking trail and followed it until he encountered two hikers. They were a young couple with expensive gear and nervous expressions. "Excuse me," Jake called out, making his voice sound tired. "Can you help me? I've been lost for a while." The couple's eyes went wide. "Oh my God, are you okay? Do you need water?" Jake accepted their water gratefully. "Thank you. I went on a solo trip about a month ago. Got turned around during a storm. Lost most of my gear crossing a swollen river. I have been trying to find my way back ever since." The couple immediately called for help on their satellite phone. Within 2 hours, a park ranger helicopter arrived. The ranger was a woman named Lisa Chen, who Jake knew slightly from his own time as a ranger. "Jake Morrison, we have been looking for you for weeks. Everyone thought you were dead. I am hard to kill," Jake said with a weak smile. They flew him to a ranger station. A doctor checked him over. Jake was dehydrated and had lost weight, but he was in surprisingly good condition for someone who had been lost for a month. The doctor seemed impressed. "You must have some serious survival skills," the doctor said. "I have been practicing for years," Jake replied. The Park Service and local police asked many questions. Jake stuck to his story. Solo survival trip, got lost. Survived on plants and small game. Made shelters. Kept moving until he found people. It was simple and believable. They asked why he had not stayed in one place to make rescue easier. Jake explained that he had not heard any search helicopters, so he assumed they had given up. He thought his best chance was to keep moving toward civilization. It was not the textbook survival strategy, but it was plausible enough. And Jake's reputation as an experienced survivalist supported the story. After 2 days of questions and medical checks, they let Jake go home. His cabin was exactly as he had left it. The traps he had set 5 weeks ago were still there, rusted and empty. His truck was in the driveway, covered in dust. Jake went inside and closed the door. For the first time in over a month, he was truly alone and truly home. He sat down on his couch and just breathed. He had done it. He had survived alien abduction. He had escaped from a spaceship. He had made it home, and no one would ever know the truth. Over the next few days, Jake's story made local news. "Local survivalist survives month lost in wilderness." The reports were brief and respectful. A few newspapers wanted interviews, but Jake politely declined. He told them he just wanted to get back to normal life. Most people accepted this. Jake Morrison was known for being private. It made sense that he would not want attention. Life slowly returned to normal. Jake went back to his routines. He checked his supplies. He maintained his equipment. He went on his regular hikes through the mountains, but everything had changed. Jake knew now that Earth was not alone in the universe. He knew that aliens existed, that they traveled between stars, that they found humans interesting, and he knew something else. Humans were special. The Xylothians had technology millions of years ahead of Earth, but Jake had still escaped. He had outsmarted them using nothing but observation, planning, and determination. That was the human advantage. Humans could adapt. Humans could survive anywhere, with anything. Take away their tools and they made new ones. Put them in impossible situations and they found a way through. Jake thought about Kessa, Plixin, and the other Xylothians. He hoped they were okay. He hoped he had not gotten Plixin in too much trouble. They had been kind to him in their way, but kindness did not change the fact that they had taken him. And Jake Morrison protected his freedom above all else. One night, Jake stood on his porch and looked up at the stars. Somewhere up there, the Xylothians were traveling to their next mission. Somewhere up there, they were probably updating their files about humans. He wondered what they would write. Would they mark humans as dangerous? Would they warn other aliens to stay away from Earth? Jake smiled. Good, let them be warned. Humanity was not ready for contact yet. When humans finally reached the stars on their own, they would do it as equals, not as specimens. Until then, Jake would keep his secret. He would live his quiet life in the mountains. And he would be ready because Jake Morrison was always ready. The stars twinkled silently above. Jake raised his coffee mug in a small salute. "Safe travels," he said to the night sky. Then he went inside to sleep in his own bed on his own world as a free man. 6 months had passed since Jake returned to Earth. Life had settled into a comfortable rhythm again. His cabin in the mountains was quiet and peaceful. The media attention had faded. People had stopped asking questions about his month in the wilderness. Jake went about his normal routines.
He hunted and fished.
He tended his garden. He maintained his survival supplies. To anyone watching, he was the same Jake Morrison who had disappeared into the woods months ago, but Jake had changed. He saw the world differently now. Every night he looked at the stars and wondered, were the Xylothians out there right now studying another species? Had they reported their findings about humans to their Galactic Council? Sometimes Jake thought about his time on the ship. He remembered Kessa's curiosity and kindness. He remembered Plixen's decision to help him escape. Not all the memories were bad. The aliens had treated him well considering he was their prisoner, but they had still taken his freedom. And that was something Jake could never forgive. One afternoon, Jake was hiking in his favorite section of the forest when he noticed something odd. A tree had markings that did not look natural. They were too precise, too deliberate. Jake examined them carefully. They were coordinates. Someone had carved GPS coordinates into the tree. Jake's survival instincts went on alert. This was not a coincidence. Someone knew something. Someone was leaving him a message. He followed the coordinates. They led him deeper into the forest to a cave he knew well. Inside the cave, hidden behind rocks, was a package wrapped in waterproof material. Jake opened it carefully. Inside was a letter and a small device. The letter was written in English, but the handwriting was strange. The letters were too perfect, too precise. It had been written by someone who did not normally use this alphabet. Jake Morrison, the letter read. I hope this message finds you well. I am Kessa. I wanted you to know that Plixen faced no serious consequences for helping you escape. Captain Vexnor was angry, but he recognized that Plixen acted out of compassion. This is considered an admirable trait among our people. Your escape taught us many things about humans. We have updated our records. Earth is now classified as a developing world with exceptional adaptive capabilities. No Xylothian ship will attempt to take humans for study again. We will wait until your species reaches the stars on your own. The device in this package is a communication beacon. If you ever need help or if you simply want to talk, activate it. We will hear you. Consider it a gift from one friend to another. I hope your life on Earth is good. Thank you for teaching us about humanity. We will not forget what we learned from you. May you survive and thrive as your species does best. The letter was signed with a symbol Jake recognized as Kessa's name. Jake held the small device in his hand. It was smooth and warm, made of the same material as the Xylothian ship. A simple button on one side was the only control. For a long time, Jake just looked at it. Part of him wanted to throw it away. He had worked hard to put that experience behind him. The device was a connection to a world he had left behind. But another part of him was curious. And if he was honest with himself, he had questions. So many questions about the universe, about other species, about what was out there among the stars. Jake put the device in his pocket. He would not use it today. Maybe not ever. But it was good to know the option was there. He burned the letter, scattering the ashes in a stream. No evidence, no traces. That was the smart thing to do. As he walked back to his cabin, Jake thought about the future. Humanity would reach the stars eventually. Maybe in 100 years, maybe in 1,000. But it would happen. Humans were explorers and survivors. They never stopped pushing forward. When that day came, humans would meet the Xylothians and countless other species. They would have to navigate a galaxy full of civilizations far more advanced than Earth. It would be challenging and dangerous. But Jake was not worried. Humans had survived ice ages and plagues. They had crossed oceans and climbed mountains. They had adapted to every environment Earth could throw at them. They would adapt to space too. And when they did, they would do it on their own terms, not as specimens or curiosities. As equals, Jake smiled at the thought. The Xylothians had learned an important lesson. Never underestimate humans. Never assume that primitive means weak. Humans had reached the top of Earth's food chain not through strength or speed, but through intelligence and adaptability. Those same traits would serve humanity well among the stars. Back at his cabin, Jake made dinner and sat on his porch. The sun was setting, painting the sky in beautiful colors. Birds called to each other in the trees. A deer walked through his yard, completely unbothered by his presence. This was home. This was what he had fought to return to. Peace, quiet, and freedom. Jake thought about all the other humans on Earth. Billions of people living their lives completely unaware that aliens existed. They went to work, raised families, pursued dreams. They worried about everyday problems like bills and relationships and career choices. Should he tell them the truth? Should he reveal what he knew about the universe? Jake decided against it. The world was not ready. If people knew aliens existed, it would cause panic. Governments would militarize. Religious groups would struggle with the implications. Social order might collapse. Better to let humanity develop naturally. When the time was right, when humans reached the stars on their own, they would be ready for the truth. Until then, Jake would keep his secret. He would be the only human who knew that Earth was being watched, that humanity had been evaluated and found worthy of respect. It was a heavy secret to carry, but Jake had carried heavier loads through harder terrain. He would manage. As night fell, Jake went inside. He placed the Xylothian communication device on a shelf next to his survival gear and emergency supplies. It sat there among his tools, an alien artifact in a survivalist cabin. Jake wondered if he would ever use it. Probably not. He valued his privacy too much. But it was comforting to know that if Earth ever faced a crisis, if humanity ever needed help, there was a way to call for it. He hoped that day would never come. He hoped humans would solve their own problems, face their own challenges, and reach the stars through their own effort and determination. But if the worst happened, if Earth faced something it could not handle alone, Jake Morrison had a beacon that could reach across the galaxy. It was the ultimate survival tool, a way to call for help from friends among the stars. Jake lay down in his bed in his cabin on his planet. He closed his eyes and smiled. He had survived the impossible. He had been taken to the stars and found his way home. He had shown an advanced alien species that humans were not to be underestimated. Not bad for a guy who just wanted to live quietly in the mountains. Outside, the stars shined down on Earth. Somewhere among those stars, Xylothian ships continued their research. They cataloged new species, studied new worlds, and expanded the knowledge of the Galactic Council. But when they looked at Earth now, they saw something different. Not a primitive world full of simple creatures. They saw a planet full of survivors, a species that could adapt to anything, a people who valued freedom above all else. They saw humanity, and they understood that someday humans would join them among the stars. When that day came, the galaxy would never be the same. Jake Morrison slept peacefully, dreaming of mountains and forests, of survival and freedom. He was home, he was free, and he was ready for whatever came next. Because that is what humans do. They prepare, they adapt, they survive, and they never give up.